All right, hello everyone. This week we are going to make this really cute little koi pond picture, and it's a bird's eye view, meaning you're pretending like the koi pond is, in the ground, and you're standing above it looking down. And so that's the point of view of two of the koi fish swimming around in the pond, and there's little ivies or vines growing in it, not really ivy. And then I did use a white crayon to make some little bubbles in the water, and I painted it with watercolor. I used just, a plain basic set of watercolors. You can get it at the grocery store. I actually bought this one at Tom Thumb, Target, Hobby Lobby, Michael's, Amazon. You also could use washable markers and paint with just a paintbrush and water. Oops, that means I have lunch duty. And then that will turn it into paint. Or you can just color it with crayons, markers, colored pencils, the things you normally use. Again, I'll tell you later in the video when, times like this during the whole COVID and quarantine and all the craziness kind of going on, it's not time to be picky and think you have to have certain things, because you don't. Okay, so basically you just take the supplies you do have and you make them work to the best of your ability. Okay, and so you're going to need paper, something to draw with. If you have a Sharpie, get that out, and something to color with. If you happen to have a paintbrush or watercolors, you can go ahead and get those too. And if you don't, do not go to your parents and tell them you need it, because you don't. Again, you can use what you have and make it work. Okay, so get your stuff together and we will get started. Okay, our first step is going to be to fold our paper in half. Sometimes teachers call this a hamburger fold. I try to stay away from that because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, really. All right, and then keeping it folded, fold it again. All right, make a nice crease, and then open it up, flatten it out. And now we have our 4 boxes, which will help us place everything where we need it for the right place and to be the right size. Okay, so now we're going to begin drawing our fish. One is going to be on the left. It's going to be start about here, go down to about here, and it's going to be kind of like a bent teardrop. So I'm going to make a little mark right about here, because that's where it's going to start. And then I'm going to make a little mark. Notice I'm going past the fold down here, about 2 or 3 inches, and I'm going to make a little mark down here because that's where I want it to end up. And so I'm going to do it really light and sketchy. I'm coming down, going towards the edge of the paper, past the fold. I'm going to turn a little bit, come down here, turn and come back up. And again, notice how I'm doing it sketchy so I can alter it and change it as I need or want to. I'm turning and coming in, making a turn to come back up and come to a point here. Now the point ended up being a little higher than I wanted it to, but that's okay because it's still pretty much in the right area. And so there is my first, it's kind of like a water drop or teardrop. And that is going to become one of my fish. It's going to be the smaller one. Now the other one's going to be over here on the right side. It's going to begin right about here. So again, I'm just making a little mark. And it's going to come down farther because this one's bigger. It's going to come down almost to the fold. It's just going to come just a little bit short of touching it. I'm looking at my paper so you can see a little better. And it's going to come down here. And it's going to be wider. Okay, so I'm going to start about here. And I'm going to come down. Again, I'm drawing light and sketchy. When you draw light and sketchy, it gives you more options because you can change it easier. And I'm turning, coming around and back up. And again, I'm going to turn and come back, and I'm aiming for here where I started. And I'm just making over to the point, and there we go. So now it looks like 2 teardrops, and they're going to become 2 fish. And again, take note of how light I drew and how sketchy I drew. That way when I go over it, when I outline it with a Sharpie, the paper won't get in the way. And then if I needed to make something come out more or in more, you can change it a lot easier and erase it a lot easier if you draw light and sketchy than if you push down hard with your pencil. Okay, so now we're going to draw their tails. We're going to start with the bigger fish. And it's going to be, the tails are going to be very similar to a flower petal. See what I did there? And same thing over here. So hopefully you can use your imagination and see how those look kind of like a leaf or a flower petal. Okay, and again, I didn't make it very sketchy, but I am trying to make it nice and light. And then I'm going to go over here and do the same thing for this one. This one, again, kind of like a flower petal or a leaf. And notice how I'm turning my paper to kind of give myself a better angle to be drawing at. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. All right, so now I feel like this one looks kind of funny. I want to kind of work on that a little bit. And there's a good example you get to see in action of how drawing light and sketchy can help you. All right, so now my 2 little fish friends have their tails. Now we're going to do their little fins that help them swim. Think of like Nemo. And the fin on this guy is going to be right about here. And again, it's kind of like a little flower petal or leaf. Another one here. All right. Like something's kind of off with that one. There we go. I like that better. Okay, and then same thing with this guy. I'm going to do one right here. All right, and then another one over here. All right, looking good. I'm happy with them so far. Okay, now they're going to have the fin on their back. Now keep in mind, these are koi fish in a pond like in the ground. So you're standing above the pond looking down on the koi fish. That's working on my finger somehow. So you're looking at the backs here. So I'm going to make a little kind of curved line. And then on one side of it, I just make kind of a little wispy line that comes in. And that's the little fin on his back. Same thing with this guy. I'm going to put a line here. And then again on one side, just kind of a little wispy line. And so that's the little fin on their back. You're looking straight above them. And now the eyes. And again, sometimes people call this a bird's eye view. So if that helps you understand it. So I'm going to have his eye. And then another one over here. And their eyes are kind of large compared to their body. That would be proportion. Talked about that earlier in the school year. Eye over here for this fella. That one's really big, but I'm going to leave it. I like it. And then another eye over here. And again, it's like you're a bird looking down on them. All right. And then we're going to draw some little vines in the water. So I have a little line that's going to kind of meander across the middle of them. And I'm going to draw some little leaves on them. Just kind of put them here and there. You don't want to go crazy cuckoo with it or anything. But you also don't want to leave it looking empty and sparse either. There we go. And then I'm going to have just a little bit of a vine peeking in over here. Just 2 leaves coming in. And the example I'm watching or looking at doesn't have the lines on the leaves, but I'm going to add them. I feel like kind of needs them. It needs a little something. Okay. And then some little spots on our fish. All right. And hopefully you've seen some koi fish in person and you know what they look like. Notice how I'm trying to make the spots in different places on the fish's body. Some would be closer to the edge, some would be bigger, some would be smaller. All right, so now I have my fish drawn, I have my little lines, and I have my water. And I will also do some like bubbles and little waves in the water. But I'm going to do that when I'm coloring. I'm going to turn this just a little bit so I can see them. I can see all my picture, mainly, most importantly, so you can see all of my picture. And now I'm going to move on to the Sharpie. Okay, so for my Sharpie on this one, I'm going to do it a little differently. Normally, I take a black Sharpie and I outline everything in black. And if a black Sharpie is all you have, then go for it. Totally fine. But if you have some colored markers, you can also use those. Now, mine just happened to be Sharpie. Yours do not have to be Sharpie brand. They could be any brand of markers. But if you have colored markers, you might want to do that for a little bit of a change of pace. But again, you could still use black if that's all you have. And especially those of you working from home, you're kind of limited on what you have. But I got out all of my different oranges from light to dark. It may be kind of hard to tell in the camera, but this one's really more of a peach, a lighter orange, a darker orange, and kind of a red orange on the camera. These look almost identical. But I'm going to take it and I'm going to use the orange and outline it instead of my usual black that I use. So I'm going to just outline everything with my cute little fish. Thinking about the eyes. Right now, I may come back and outline near the eyes too, but for now, I'm going to leave that empty so that I have options. And doing the little pins, make sure they're connected. And again, if you choose to do orange, you will be able to see the pencil through it to some extent, and that's okay. But if that bothers you, then you may want to go with my brain is not working for me, black. So this one, I just used the regular orange for that one. And now I'm going to use this, it's really more peach, but it's in the same family as the orange for the little spots on the koi fish. My mom used to have a koi fish pond in her backyard, and it was so fun to go out there and just watch and look at. One thing that was sad, we never knew until we put the koi fish pond in our backyard, is that the fish go after, the birds go after the fish. They grab them and pull them out of the pond. Remember, my mom went and bought some koi fish, wherever you get them. I'm not even sure where she got them. And she came back the next day. They were gone, all of them. And her like bird feathers and stuff. And she realized that birds were taking her koi fish. And I can't remember what she did to stop the birds, because I remember she went and got more. She may have put like some kind of decoy to scare the birds off or something. I'll have to ask her what she did, because by then I was grown and living in my own house. So, this looks so cute. I just love it. All right, now for the eyes, I am going to use black for the eyes. I messed up a little bit there. Just make it a little darker. And I'm glad I skipped the orange there, because I'm going to go ahead and do that and color that in. You can see this Thompson Sharpie is drying out. I'm trying to see if I can make that work, so I don't have to stop recording. I can find a new Sharpie. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to fix that. All right, so let me go find a newer and better Sharpie. All right, so hopefully this one will be a little better. Oh yeah, definitely better. It's really not a whole lot newer, but it still has more ink. All right, how cute they are. Just I love animals, every animal. It was fun to have that pond to just sit by and relax. We'd go over there and have dinner with my mom and go out there at night and just relax. It was nice. I miss that. She doesn't live there anymore, so we don't have that anymore. Someone else gets to enjoy it now. All right, so now I'm going to do my vines. I got the different greens that I have. Now, again, it does not have to be Sharpie brand. It could be any colored markers. But again, if you don't have those, you could use just black Sharpie or whatever you have. This is kind of a green kind of in the middle. Let me really use this one. I'm going to use this for the leaves. You can see I'm doing that little line down the middle as well. And then I'm going to come back with a different green and do the actual vine. So there, that's a lighter green. So you can see them compared. This is more of your traditional green. And I'm going to, and I just noticed something I missed. I'm curious if you could see what Miss Thompson missed and needs to go back and fix. Hopefully you see it by now. If not, it's right here. I missed that little line on the leaf. There we go. Okay, so hopefully you would know what the next step would be at this point, and the next step would be erasing. Now, since I did it with Sharpie, I can erase without any worry. If you were using a washable marker, like a Crayola marker, you can still erase your pencil. You just need to be careful because it will smear a little more easy. Sharpie's permanent, so you don't have to worry about it smearing as long as it's dry. All right, so I am going to fast forward so I can finish erasing. It's not very exciting to watch me erase. If you're still outlining, you can pause until you're finished outlining and erasing, and then we'll discuss coloring it. Okay, so I have everything outlined and erased. And earlier in the video, I mentioned that we would draw kind of bubbles in the water and waves. Now, the way that would work is you could use a white crayon, or for your colored pencils, especially if you're using a good brand like the Prismacolor. We all know how Miss Thompson loves her Prismacolors. Again, if you are younger than 3rd and 4th grade, I don't recommend investing and spending that amount of money if you are that young. The youngest I would start with Prismacolor is really 3rd grade, maybe a real advanced 2nd grader. But anyway, there's my white Prismacolor and my white crayon. Now, originally, I found this lesson on artprojectsforkids.org, and she had intended for it to be a watercolor resist. And I made this video in March of 2021, and we're still in the midst of the whole COVID fun, and we're not allowed to paint right now because we're in the regular classrooms. So watercolor resist, unfortunately, is not an option for us at this point. But if you're watching the video later than March 2021, or if you're at home and you have watercolor, that is an option for you. I recommend using a crayon or an oil pastel. You could do the Prismacolors, but I think the crayon might work best. And on the background, you would draw your little bubbles, little circles. Do them in groups of 2, 3, 5, ones by themselves. Do them here and there, and you're just, basically drawing little circles. The harder you press down with your crayon or whatever you're working with, the better you will be able to see them when you paint. Okay, now I'm realizing the vast majority of you will not have watercolors at home, and that's okay. Don't feel bad about that at all. I'm just adding some bubbles here and there. So then at this point, you would take your watercolors. Let me pause this real quick to grab my watercolor. Okay, and so if you're in elementary, just a regular watercolor set is really all you need. I recommend the brand Prang, P-R-A-N-G, or Crayola. I really don't recommend any other ones unless it's like you're in a Hobby Lobby or a Michael's and you're buying like a nice brand. But don't waste your money on the rose art or the crazy ones, crazy art. Don't do that. And so you would get a little cup of water and a paintbrush, and you'd use your blue, and you would just paint right over those little bubbles that you made, making your background. And then the watercolor would resist the crayon, meaning it wouldn't stick to it, and you would have your little white bubbles sticking out amidst your water. Okay, and it's a lot of fun. It's really cool. But I didn't want to spend too much time on that because I realize probably 90% of you are not going to have these at home. But for those of you that do, that is an option. And I'm probably going to paint mine just so you can see what it looks like. But for most of you that are probably at home with just regular colored pencils and markers and crayon, just, you could just take out your blue, whatever shade of blue you choose, and color your water. Okay, now for everything else, like for the leaves and the fish, that you're just going to color. You can use your markers, your crayons, your colored pencils, whatever you choose to color with. I'm using my Prismacolors here, and I would just, color them the old-fashioned way. Now, technically, you could paint the fish if you chose, but be sure you let the water dry first. So pretend I painted all of this blue. Okay, I'm going to let the blue completely dry before I even think about painting the fish, because otherwise the orange and the blue will run together and you will have a huge mess, because water is going to travel wherever there is other water. So before you paint a different area, you need to let that dry. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to color both of the fish with just, markers and colored pencils, and then I'm only going to paint the water. So for me, that makes it right. I don't have to worry about it. But again, for you, just to warn you and let you know, those of you that have gone to my school for several years, back when we used to actually get to be in the art room and paint, you may remember we would paint what part of our picture, and then we would hang it up to dry, and we would leave it, and you wouldn't even paint on it again until the next time you had art. And the reason for that was I didn't want those colors to run together and make a big mess. So, and we talked about that some, but unfortunately for all of us, that is a faint memory now, thanks to COVID. But I'm hoping all of that will be starting to get behind us soon. I know I got my first COVID vaccine on Sunday, and I was so happy to get it. I never thought I'd be so happy to get a shot. All right, so I am going to fast forward to finish coloring the leaves and my fish, and then we'll talk about the water just a little bit more. So color your leaves and your fish. If you're painting, paint your leaves and your fish, or paint your water first, pause and paint them, and then we'll come back and we'll wrap this up. Okay, so I finished coloring my fish and my vine and my leaves, and the only thing left is the water. Remember, I have already taken a white crayon and I made some bubbles here and there on the white. You can't really see it because it's white on white, but when I paint it, you will be able to see it. Now remember, if you are at home and you do not have watercolors, it is okay. You can just color it with markers, crayons, colored pencils, whatever it is that you have. I just had actually one student request it, one of our fourth graders, and he mentioned that we've been drawing all year, and of course COVID is the reason for that. But I'm just, for those of you that do have watercolors at home, did you see how I accidentally got it on that fish? And he's dry. Remember what I said about making sure it's not wet next to wet. So I was able just to kind of move the paint over and wipe it off. But you can see the little white bubbles there. It's resisting it. And so that's what we're doing. Also, a little trick a lot of people don't know is if you have washable markers, primarily the Crayola brand, you can put a little bit of marker on your paper. Watch, see how I got to smooth that off? And then paint with just water, and it will turn that marker into paint. So that is also an option for you. It's a little bit of a different experience because you're using marker on it first, and you want to use enough water that you make the marker dissolve and move around. You don't want to like still see those lines that you made or circles or whatever you end up making to paint with the marker. But what I may do is try doing it on the other side to show you what your options are. My picture may not look completely normal if I do that, or maybe I'll just use a scrap piece of paper to show you guys. It might be better, and then I don't mess up my picture because I think it's looking really cute. Now I am kind of regretting not outlining these guys with black Sharpie like I usually do, so I may actually go back over them and add that. But again, see how it's resisting the paint, and see how in some areas the blue's lighter and in some areas it's darker. That's actually a good thing because it's not so flat and boring and the same. And in real life, it wouldn't be one flat color. All right, so I'm going to fast forward to finish painting this. And again, whether you're coloring or whether you're painting, any of them are okay. Again, in a year like 2020 and 2021, when we're dealing with COVID-19, we can't get too picky, too stressed out about little details of life. Okay, and then I'm also going to show a little sample demo of how you can paint with markers. All right, so unless you're wanting to paint with the markers, hit pause and finish painting or coloring your picture. And if you are wanting that demo, then hang on, and I'm going to show you that in the next scene. All right, and there we go. I didn't end up outlining it with the black, but I may do that later before I put it on my cart for all the in-person kids to see. But for now, I'm going to leave it, try to keep an open mind about trying something new. But I think it turned out really cute, even without the black lines. And it's drying pretty quick. But again, if you don't have watercolors, please don't get upset about it because you can completely make this picture without the watercolors. No problem at all. These are still in the process of drying, but you can see how it's kind of turning out. And again, definitely a different look, but it doesn't mean it's wrong or anything. So you do have a couple options. But again, there's nothing wrong with just coloring, especially at times like this. We are not in a position to be Mr. or Miss Picky Pants, okay? So I hope you have a great week. Those of you that are my students, and it's March of 2021, be sure you send me a picture of your art, please, because I really do enjoy seeing it. All right, so thank you, and have a great week. Okay, so I finished painting my koi fish, and I think it turned out really great. I'm still trying to decide whether I want to outline it with black marker. I'll make that decision in a few minutes. But I wanted to show you about painting with markers. Now you want to use washable markers. I recommend the Crayola brand. But as long as it's washable, other brands should work as well. Like this is a Sargent. And I'm going to show you, you have two different ways you can, well actually, I guess you technically have several different ways, but there's two different ways I'm going to show you. The first way, I call this the halo method, because it's like you're outlining whatever the shape is with a halo. Here I have a circle but it doesn't have to be a circle. Okay, and I'm going to want to get lots of ink around the edge of the circle, because the ink is what's going to become my paint. If I don't have enough ink, there won't be enough paint, and it won't work out well. Now that should be more than enough. Now another way is to do it with dots. We used to do this a lot when I was a little girl, and I actually haven't done this in a really long time. Now, depending on how well the paper holds on to the ink, you may still see some of the dots, and you may not. They may completely dissolve into watercolors. We're actually going to find out together. All right, so I've got my marker on there. I'm going to start with this one first. Now, it's important that the space around it is completely dry. Otherwise, it's going to run together. And I've got a cup of just water, nothing else, just water and just my brush. And then I take the water and I paint right on top of the marker, and it turns it into watercolors. And I paint towards the center, and it, like I said before, turns into a watercolor. Now, the edges will, of course, stay darker than the middle, and that's okay. Depending on how much you take your brush and work into the ink and try to spread it, move it around, depends on how much it will run. Now see how it went outside the edge here? And the reason it did that is because I got water outside the edge. And then I would let it dry. Now obviously this is going to have a very different look than if you used a traditional watercolor, but it doesn't mean it's bad. Sometimes it ends up looking better. Now over here, I'm going to attempt to dissolve the dots and turn that into paint. You can see how I'm painting over the dots and it's dissolving them. Obviously, the more you do, the more watercolor it will create. Because again, you're thinking that ink becomes the paint. And again, depending on the paper that you use, the size of the dots, how many you do, how much water you use, will all depend on how much you will see the dots after it's over. But I think this would be kind of an interesting way if you didn't have watercolors to paint the water around your fish. And as you can see, two very, very different looks. And then once this completely dries, I'll show you what it looks like. Ooh, I've had some other color in it. All right, so I'm going to let that dry and see what happens. I could also do like lines. Now, keep in mind, normally I would wait for this to dry completely before I would paint next door because I don't want that to run together. But since I have to go do lunch duty in a minute, and it's the same color, I'm going to go ahead and look at that. That actually looks really good. I like that. So that would be another option. There's the side of the square. I really like that. That looks nice. And then, of course, I could outline it like I did with this circle. And again, I call this the halo method because it's like you're drawing a halo around it. And if you don't like being able to see the look of the marker still there, the halo method might be the best bet for you. But when you're doing a really large space, like that water around the fish, that might be a bit of an issue. And look at that. So all painting with markers, but different techniques. All right. So if you don't have watercolors at home and you're really, really wanting to paint something, that is an option for you.